Okay, so we're on the top line of Gimel Amid Aleph. Good morning, Rafal. Good morning, Dovi. So Lishna Achrina, this Gemara is really going to be the same as the explanation in Cheshbon as before, just with the ending it will conclude in the opposite direction. We had, as you'll see, in the end before we said that the Lishonis of Oisai and Lachtzais and Mechitza tend to show that Hezekriya Lav Shmehaz. I think we're just going to end off differently, the opposite way around, that will show that Hezekriya Shmehaz. Lishnachrina, Amrila, Savrua, my Mechitza Plukta. The Gemara wants to say that the word Mechitza that's used in the Mishnah, Mechitza, it means that they want to make a division. We bring the same puzzle that we brought before, that when they were dividing up the spoils of war, it says Mechza Ha'eda, the half of the Eda. So they wanted to split it. The Kivin the Ratzu, and once they want to split up, then once they decide to split up the property, then they're forced to build a wall because of Hezekriya Shmehezek. Alma Hezekriya Shmehezek. Okay, so that's the proposition. Let's say the mechitza doesn't mean plukta, like we're assuming to start in this sugya, in this lishna, but rather it's the other way around. Mechitza means a wall, which would, of course, tell you that Hezekriya Loish Mehezek. And we bring the same right like we brought. It's not mechitza kem shenifetza imle gedar. If the wall between a vineyard and a sada falls down, you tell him to put it back up. The owner of the sada tells him to put it back up. Nifritza, it fell. So he put it up and it broke down again. Nifritza, it fell down again. Emily Gadar, he's telling him to put it up again. It's Nayashemana. And if at that point the owner of the vineyard just gives up and he doesn't put it up, below Gadra, if he didn't put it up, Hareza Kiddush, it becomes all Klai and B'chai Bachri Yusa. The owner of the vineyard is going to have to compensate the owner of the sod. So in any case, but the whole point is Mechitza Karen doesn't mean over here we're dividing the Karen. It means that you're talking about a wall between the Karen and the Sada. So it's just a raya of what the word Mechitza means in the Mishnah. So you see Mechitza means a Guda. It means a wall. And if you're saying a Mechitza means a wall, so a Mishnah is saying Shiratzu Lachtas means they want to build a wall. The time of the Ratzu. The only reason why they have to put up a wall is because they both agree with it. Haloi Ratzu, but if they don't both want to, Ein Mechayven, I say one can't tell the other one, you have to do it because of Hezekriya. Alma Hezekriya, Lashme has it. So that would say that Hezekriya Lashme has it. So this is going against our original assumptions. Why does it say Bainin as a Kaisel? It should say Bainin Oisei, since we already referred to Hashutfin Sharatzu Lasas Mechitza. So we said Bainin as a Bainin. We said already Sharatzu Lasas Mechitza, which means a Kaisel. So why would you say the word again? Elamai Plukta, Elamai. So it must mean that the word Mechitza doesn't mean Kaisel, it means Plukta. It means to make a division. It should have used the verb instead of the word that sounds like it's saying it's talking about a noun. They want to make a wall. It sounds more like you want to make a wall than you want to make a division. You would say you want to divide. So now the Gemara, this is where we finally diverge from the earlier Pshat. We answer this question where earlier we had just left it unanswered. So the Gemara answers, they say, no, there is such a lashon. Like we just said, let's come make a division. You will say, that's a phrase that people use. They do use it as a noun. They say, let's make a deal. They don't say, let's deal. Well, let's divide up. They say, let's make a division. So it is an appropriate lashon for the Mishnah to use to say lasas mechitza instead of lachzis, even though we're talking about divide. Zok the Gemara. The Hezekriya Shmehezek. If, as we're proposing, that the Mishnah, when it says Hashutfin Sharatzu Lachzis, Sharatzu Lasas Mechitza, means that they want to divide up because of Hezekriya. Ma'ir Yaratzu. What does it have to be that they want to divide up the property? I feel Yaratzu Nami. Even if one of them doesn't want to. The general rule is if you have Shutfin, they can't force a division. If two people don't want to work together anymore, one could say, I'll pay you off and we'll split up. So why is it that we're saying that the Ratzu Lachtis? We've mentioned this before in the Gemara, this answer, but I think it was Rashi was foreshadowing because he saw this Gemara later on. So Amar Ravasi Amar Rabbi Yechanan, Ravasi Amar Rabbi Yechanan explains Mishnasenu Kshein Badin Chaluka. We're talking about a small piece of property which is less than less than 8 by Dalid. So each piece is not going to be Dalid al Dalid, which is an exception to the general rule that Shutfin can't force a Chaluka. But if it's too small, well, each person is going to be left with something that's really not useful, then there's not a din that one can force. They both have to agree to split it up. Under those circumstances, it's only if they agree. What's the chiddush of that? What is our Mishnah telling you? It's coming to tell you that when there's less than the shear for each person to have dalad al dalad kiratzu pligi, that only if they want to, then they could divide, but otherwise not. Tnina. We already have a Mishnah that says that. When is it that we say that that you can't divide up a property that's less than dalad al dalad for each one? That's only if they don't want to. But if it's less, even less than that, you could divide. So you see, the Mishnah says it explicitly. This is going to be a Mishnah later on in the parak. So the Gemara, when it says no, because I wouldn't know that you have to put a kaisel. So I want to tell you, he wants to tell you that even if it's less than dalad al dalad, and they're ratzu, at that point, what they have to put, I might think that all they have to put up is just the stakes to indicate where the end of the property is. Kamash malan hacha, kamash malan. Mashal hacha kaisel. So Mishnah over here is coming to tell you that you can't just put up a mesibas, you have to put up a kaisel because of hezekriya. The listening ha, the listening ha. So then Gemara asks, what do we have to say later on? If our Mishnah is, as we're showing, it's talking about shiratzu, so it has to be talking about a case where it's less than dalad al dalad. Otherwise, why would it be saying kishiratzu? So we know this din that it says in the Mishnah later on. What do we have to say it again? Seifa it's strichale. We need it for the seifa. The Mishnah over there ends off and it says, even though we say if they both want, even if it's less than $1 for each one, if they decide they want to split it, they can do so. But that doesn't apply to Sifrei Kodesh. If two people are shutfin and Megillas Esther, you can't say I'll have the first half of it and you'll get the other half and we'll cut it in half. The Mishnah says you're not allowed to do that. Okay, we're going to skip this entire parentheses over here because it's first of all it seems just to be a restatement of what we said before, and also you have to take off parts and leave out parts. It doesn't really work so well as is. So we're gonna leave it out. The Gemara obviously takes it out. So we're gonna skip to B'mayu Kimta, about 5 lines from the wide lines on Gimel Amud Aleph. So how are we understanding our Mishnah? So we're still going. That has a Griya Shmei Hezek, and when the Mishnah said Hashutvin Sharatzu Lachtzos, why do they have to both agree to divide? Because we're talking about an area where there's not Daled el Daled on each half. So what does it help that they agreed? They said we want to do it. Now, Hajube, now we force them to each put in half of the, like we say, they each have to pay for half the wall, and they have to give over half of the rishus. So the guy says, okay, I want to make a chalukah. And then the guy says, okay, give me my half of the money for the wall and half of the property. He says, you know what? If that's the case, I'm not willing to do it. I don't want to split. So there's nothing enforceable about this. Just because they agreed to split, the guy could change his mind and say, no, I don't want to split. So what din are we saying that they have to split up the wall? They can negotiate whatever they want. If the guy says, I'm only willing to do it if you do five tvachim or the whole thing in your property. And the other guy says no. He says, okay, so we won't split. We're talking about when they made a kinyan chalipin to say that this is an enforceable deal. When they made the agreement to split, they did a kinyan. So what does it help? You can't make a kinyan chalipin. A kinyan chalipin is not just it's not a simon that whatever you agree to is enforceable. What means a kinyan means that I'm transferring something concrete to you. Just making an agreement, you can't use a kinyan to make an agreement enforceable. You could say, if I own a cow, I'm being kind of the cow to you. But to say that I'm going to agree, let's say you're giving an easement, right? That you could use my driveway. You make a kinyan clipping on it. That's not going to work. I don't know, maybe that's chazak or something. But to make a kinyan has to go onto an actual object and say we're transferring an object. To make that our agreement to divide up the land should be something that I can't be mahada from. I can't retract. That the kinyan will not do. Zakt Gemara, no, what we're talking about is not that the economy yadim. I skip. I'm sorry. That's still that guy over there. Zakt Gemara. The Gemara answers that the way he was kinda, he wasn't kinda just that it's a non-retractable agreement. It was actually kinda that one person gets this half, these 3 amas belong to you, and then now they're yours, and now we have to build a wall. So that it's taka, it's making a kinyan on an actual piece of land as opposed to just on the agreement to later split the land. Rav Ashi says it's essentially the same teretz, but rather than talking about a kinyan chalipin, we're talking about he made a kinyan chazaka. So if we're talking about a kinyan chazaka, obviously from the beginning we would understand it has to be a kinyan on the land. You're not making a kinyan chazaka on the agreement, you're making a kinyan chazaka on what you get. We said a malkum that the minig is to make each type of wall. That's what you have to do. So gvil, what is the first thing that we said is gvil is avni delay mashpia. That's stones that are not smoothed out. Gazes avni mashpia, and gazes are stones that were smoothed out. All these valuable stones. Where's the actual pasuk? All these precious stones, kamidas, gazes, megoireris, magera. They were smooth with a tool that was used for smoothing them. So you see, gazes needs to be smoothed out. I'm sorry, that gaz is something that was smoothed out. Ksifin, archi, levain and livni. The Gemara continues. Ksifin was the third type of wall that there was a minig to do. That was where you took half stones and you put an extra tefach of cement in between them. So and levainin is a brick. So levainim are 3 tvachim wide, and ksifin, you take a brick, you split it in half. Each part is 1.5, and you put an extra tefach of cement in the middle. So that comes out to 4. How do you know that the gvil, the first one, is an unsmooth stone? We would have write that gazes is a smooth stone, but where do we know that the gvil is a unsmooth stone? And therefore, the reason why the Mishnah says that gvil is a tefach more than the gazes, the smooth stone, is because the unsmooth stone has the protruding parts that are not smooth. Maybe the gvil and the gazes, the only thing we know for sure, we know that levainim are 3 tvachim, and we know that gazes a brick is 3 tvachim, and we know gazas, which is this we touched as a smooth stone, is 5 tvachim. I'm sorry, yes, 5 tvachim. How do we know that the gvil, which is a tefach more, is because it's an unsmooth version? Maybe you take the 5 tefach stone, you cut it in half, and you put another tefach in it as cement, the same way we said by the Levanim. We don't have any source for saying that the gvil is an unsmooth stone. So Gemara could mean just like we said, ksifin archi levain livni by tefach yiseru levaini urvi. Maybe it's the same thing, the same setup like we had with the brick and the ksifin. Amalei l'tamech ksifin archi minolan. How do you know the ksifin is talking about 2 half stones? Maybe it's talking about it's a brick that wasn't smoothed out. We know that we have a tradition like that. We'll say the same thing about the Gvil. Ikad Amri, how they have this discussion exactly the opposite. How do we know that the ksifin are half bricks with cement in between? And the extra tefach is for the cement in between. Maybe ksifin are bricks that were not smoothed out. And the extra tefach is just because since it's not smooth, it takes up more room. Just like we say, because it's the mashpin. The same cheshbon, just the exact opposite. Which one are we assuming is a given and which one is not? Sorry, having a lot of trouble with my voice. Amar Abaya. Shmamina kol beini urvi tavach. Hani mili betina. Maybe that's only by a finer cement. Alva briksa boy tvei. Abaya says that's only true by a fully processed cement that doesn't have any stones mixed in. But if you have a more rough cement, then it would need more than a tefach. Maybe our mission is only talking about a cement with the stones, but a thinner mortar. You don't need a full tefach. Now the Gemara comes to another question. Lememra, the begazis, the chol dal is goiva. We said gazis, which is a smoothed off stone. The Mishnah said you need a wall that's 5 tefach high. And we're talking about a wall that's putting up for Hezekriya, so that's Dalet Amos high. So that seems to indicate that for every four Amos of height, you need a 5 tefach wide wall. Now, obviously, as you go up higher, you need a thicker wall in order to support it, right? A skyscraper can't be 5 tvachim wide. It has to be much wider in order to stay up. So, what about the Amatrax? And that was the wall in the Beis Hamikdash between the Heichel and the Kodesh Kodashim. To have a Gavoya Tlisanam Amsa, it was 30 tvachim high. Have a Pushel Shis. Its width was it was called obviously an Amatraxin. An Amma is 6 tvachim high. And even so, it stood up to 30 tvachim. Become and was able to stand. So in proportion, right? You'd think if 5 tvachim can only hold up 4 amas, how can you say the minimum that you need to hold up 4 amas is 5 tvachim? How can it be that 30 amas just needs 1 tefach more? The ratio is off. Should need really 6 times as much. Should need 30. Should need a 30 tefach wide wall. So tomorrow, even the ikka tefach yisera koi. Who says no? It seems there's a maximum. Once you get to a certain width, you get to 6 tvachim, that can go up even to 30 tvachim. It doesn't go by a ratio. 6 tvachim is a very solid wall, and that could keep on going up even more. So the Gemara says, it seems to be mashma at this point, that once you have 6 tvachim, it's indefinite how high it could go up. So the Gemara, b'mikdash sheni, my time lo'yavra amatrax. And why didn't they go up? Why didn't they make this amatrax in the mikdash sheni? This was only in the first mikdash. So the Gemara, ki koy b'tlosin. The Gemara said the first Beis Hamikdash had a ceiling that was 30 amas high. So 6 tvachim wide wall can go up to 30 amas high. Tvei loikai, but more than that, it doesn't go. And the second Beis Hamikdash had a roof that was 40 amas high, so it wouldn't have been able to stand. And of course, the horizontal measurements, the layout of the Beis Hamikdash, that was dictated by the pasuk. That couldn't be changed. So you couldn't make the wall any wider because it would take away from the area of the Heichel and the Beis Hamikdash. So if you have a higher ceiling which wasn't dictated, then it wouldn't be able to stand with a 6 tefach wide wall. When we know on the Havagavoyet, how do we know that the second Beis Hamikdash had a higher ceiling? That the cover of the second Beis Hamikdash was greater than the first. Rav Shmuel, one says as far as the height of the binyan, which is what we were just saying, and one says with the how long it was going to last. And the truth is, both of these things were valid. The second Beis Hamikdash was both higher as well as lasting longer. Zok the Gemara. The Gemara asks, so we said that the reason why you couldn't build a Beis Hamikdash, you couldn't make a amatraxin in the second Beis Hamikdash. They didn't make a wall between the Heichel and the Beit Kachi Kadosh. Instead of having a wall, they had a curtain. Why could the Gemara is now going to ask? Why didn't they make a wall? When the Abdu Tlos and Amen bebinyan, let's make a binyan, a wall of 30 tvachim. Ve'idach navet paroiches. Make the rest of it with a curtain. So the Gemara kikoi Tlos and Amsa nami agav tikru maziva havikoi. Loy tikru maziva loy havikoi. The only reason why a 30 amma wall can stand with only a 6 tefach wide wall is only when it's anchored on the top by reaching the ceiling. But if it would only go up 30 amas and it wouldn't reach the ceiling because that was another 10 amas bigger, and you put a curtain over there, there wouldn't be anything to hold it up on top, and it wouldn't last. So Gemara says, okay, so you couldn't do 30 amas, but obviously if you're making it, if a 4 amma wall goes 5 tvachim, with a 5 tefach wide wall, can go up to 4 amas. So a 6 tefach will go up a little bit more, whatever it is, maybe 10 amas without the tikra maziva. Let's do however much you can and make the rest of it with a curtain. So the Gemara says, Amar Abaye, really is you can't do anything split at all. Gemiri, kula b'binyan, kula b'paraychas. It has to be one or the other. It could either be a wall that was built, or it could be a curtain. Ikulu b'binyan mi mikdash. Ikulu b'paraychas mi mishkan. In the Mishkan they had a paraychas. In the first Beis Hamikdash they had a wall. So we learned when they were building the second Beis Hamikdash, they said you have to do like one or the other. You can't do a combination. When we're saying the shear in our Mishnah that a unsmoothed stone, let's say, is 6 and a smooth stone is 5, does that mean they used to, on top of the stone, they would make a layer of plaster? Are we saying the 6 tvachim, including that thin layer of plaster, or not? It must be including together with the plaster. If it wouldn't be including the sidan, the Mishnah should say that. It should give us some indication that it's not the full amount. Right? Because the issue is The Mishnah says you have to provide each person has to chip in for the cost of the wall, as well as providing land to cover it. But if the land has to be more than the amount of the wall that we said, we're saying that you have to give 3 tvachim, but you're also going to have to give a little extra land to cover that plaster part. So it's one thing if you say that the wall itself always means that there's plaster. Okay, so that's including the plaster. But you said you have to give the karka also, and the karka is going to have to be extended, and you didn't mention that. Allah shmamino hey misidun. That means that it includes the plaster. So no, it doesn't have to be including the plaster. That means it means 6 tvachim without plaster, and then you add on another, let's say, quarter of a tefach for plaster. But we don't need to mention it since it's a small amount. It's not so negay. So we do mention half tvachim. How can you say anything less than the tefach we don't mention? The Mishnah itself said by a brick, each person has to give 1.5 tvachim. No, because since they're each giving a half tefach, which equals up to a full tefach, that's why it's roy to be mentioned. Toshma hakoyrish amru rechava kedei lekabel ariach. We said we're talking over there. This is an erevin that they would put up a beam as a simon to make a erev that you could carry within a chatzar or in a mavli. You say that kaira has to be wide enough to accept on it an ariach. An ariach, for ariach chatzi levena. An ariach, like we said also earlier in the Gemara, an ariach is a half of a levena. Levena is gimel tvachim shel gimel tvachim. It's half of a levena of gimel tvachim. So you see that ariach, which is 1.5 tvachim, is mentioned even though it's less than a tefach. Zak Gemara Hasan Beravrasa.
What is this a riot to? What are we seeing?
You're seeing that we're l'chayre must be. We're saying that these kairos have to be big enough that you could put on top of it a levena, which is, I'm sorry, half of a levena, and a half of a levena. I'm sorry, which is 1.5 tvachim.
Right.
And the Gemara over there says, and we're not talking over there. You're not using that brick in order to actually make a wall. It's just being used as a measurement, as a simon of the size of the kaira. So there's no plaster being put on top of it. So if we're saying that the Mishnah over there says it's 3 tefachim, so you see that it's not including that extra. When we say stam a levena or an ariach, we're talking about without the extra plaster because we're using that for measurement, and we wouldn't use it's using the same measurement of 1, 1.5, and 3. The Gemara says specifically it's talking about 1.5 and 3, and it's still being used for, even though it doesn't actually have a plaster over there, since we're not talking about someone's building a wall. So you see that when we say over here levena, we say gazas, it means without the extra plaster. So no, maybe it could be that the reason why over there it doesn't mention with the plaster and it's still 3 tvachim because it's talking about a larger brick. There were smaller bricks and larger bricks. They can have it tvachim. But also you see that because the Mishnah specifically says over there it's a levena of 3 tvachim. For the fact that it's saying shel 3 tvachim means that there's a smaller one. So what's the smaller one? The smaller one could be like the one in our Mishnah, which is let's say 2 3/4. And it also has a plaster on top, which is what our Mishnah is including. Shmamina. So Einachanami, it's not Nishken right. Amar of Chizda. Leilister Inish. I know it's a little bit late, but this, if you don't mind, we could finish this quickly because this is a gadat. Amar of Chizda. Leilister Inish Beknishta. Ad the Bani Beknishta Achrita. A person shouldn't knock down a shul until he builds a replacement shul. Igdami Mishum Pshiyusa. Some say because we're worried about that maybe something will happen and you'll never get a chance to rebuild the new shul. And other people say because you're not going to have a place to daven in the meantime. So you have to first build a new shul, and then you can knock down the old one. My beinayu, what's the difference between them? Ika beinayu, the ika be knishta achriti. But there is another shul already standing. The Bach changes it to a similar lashon that means the same thing. The ika shambekaita b'chusa v'sasri ubanu beisiyus. Okay, whatever. Maremo mazutra sasri ubanu bekaita b'siyusa ubanu beisiyusa bekaita. They would every year they would build like a cool a cool airy shul for the summer, and they would have a strong warmer one for the winter. And during the winter they would knock down the one for the summer and build it up during the winter, so it should be ready for the summer. And then this vice versa, they would knock down and build each one. Amalei Ravina Lavashi Gavu Zuzi Umachsi. Man. So the basically we're saying that over there, since they had the other one that was already they could use, they were able to knock down. They were not able to knock down the winter one during the summer because they already had the summer one to use. So, what happens if they already have the money to build the other shul? Do we still say it's a concern that maybe they won't get to build another one? Amalei Dilmas Amilu Pigeon Shvuyim says no, because what happens if a pigeon Shvuyim opportunity comes? You're going to have to redirect the money you saved for the shul, and you'll end up without a shul. Takamara pigeon shul v'yavilu shrigi livni v'yavilu shrigi livni v'hadri hudri umachtik shurimai. What if you have already all the building materials, the beams and the stones to rebuild the new shul? So that you're not going to give for pidyon shvuyim. Maybe you'll have to sell them, and you'll still won't end up with a basic knesses. Even if they built it, maybe they'll have to sell the basic knesses. Once it's already built, then you don't sell it even for pidyon shvuyim. All this is that we say that you don't knock it down until you have another one, is there's no cracks. But if there are cracks, then you have to knock it down because it's dangerous. He saw there were cracks in the shul, the masa, machse, in the place of machse, sasre, and he knocked it down. And he brought his bed into that place. He didn't leave, so he wanted to basically encourage his congregants to build a new shul. So he camped out. He brought his tent and his sleeping bag, and he camped out on the building site until it was finished. So like Elon Musk and his factory over there. He says, if I'm going to be here, and until you build it up, I'm going to be camping out. Zak Gemara, Ubav Mabuta. How did Bava and Buta give an Eitzah to Hurdus who knocked down the old Beis Hamikdash and rebuilt it? What about our rule that we said that you can't knock down a shul? Maybe there were cracks in the old Beis Hamikdash. A malchus is different since there's nothing to make them to go back on what they intend to do. The malchus says to uproot a mountain, you uproot a mountain. And they're not going to go back. They're very stubborn. Hurda was an eved of the Beis Hashmonai. He put his eyes on a certain girl who was the last living descendant of the Hashmonaim. He wanted to marry her to get the validity, the credibility. Bas called Amakal Avda the Marid Hashta Mitzlach. Said any Eved who's gonna, he heard a Baskoil, he had a vision that if he'll be married, if he'll do a rebellion, he'll be Matzliach. Kom Katlina Lekula Murusea. He went and killed all the masters. And this girl was the last one that was left. She saw that he wanted to marry her. She went up to the roof of Rama college. She called out, whoever says I'm coming for the base Chashmonoi is an Eved because I'm the last Chashmonoi and I'm going to kill myself. So she said that there's no one left besides myself. She's falling from the roof to the ground, and that's what she did. Hordus took her corpse and preserved it in honey for 7 years. Some says he used it for his own purposes. And others say he didn't. He wasn't born her. The one that says he was born her, it's because he wanted to indulge his tivus. That which he preserved the in order that people will say that he was married to the daughter of a melech. Okay, we're going to stop over here, and we'll continue with the story of Herdus as Shema Matzah Shabbos.
All right, thank you.
Have a good Shabbos,
everyone.